President.
Senator from Iowa.
Thank you, Mr. President. I come to the Senate floor today to express my concern about recent attacks on the legitimacy of the judicial branch of government. A fair and neutral judiciary plays a very indispensable role in our constitutional structure. Judges wield enormous power, and their decisions determine the legal rights of the parties before them. One especially potent power of the judiciary is the practice of judicial review. As we all know, the judiciary sometimes decides cases that impact the operation of laws passed by Congress or the actions of the executive branch. We accept this judicial review because neutral arbiters are necessary in a system based upon the rule of law, but this system only works if everyone accepts that the arbiters are, in fact, neutral. Litigants, the co-equal branches of government, and the American people must be confident that judges are merely saying what the law is and not what those judges wish the law to be. Our judicial system also requires respect for appellate review. The federal courts are hierarchical, and the rule of law depends on public confidence that lower courts will faithfully apply and respect the decisions of the higher courts. It's no surprise that some people are not always happy with how the courts exercise judicial power. Criticism is fair and sometimes warranted, but too often it is strayed into outright attacks on the judiciary as an institution. Today, however, I'm here to discuss attacks on the judiciary coming particularly from a concerning place, that is, within the judiciary itself. It's one thing for the political branches or the public to criticize the Supreme Court. It's entirely different for federal judges themselves to undermine their own branch of government. In two high-profile instances in the last few months, numerous judges have anonymously, as you might expect, gone to the press to denigrate the Supreme Court, and this ought to be deeply concerning, not only to this senator, but the public at large. On September 4th, 2025, NBC News published a report alleging that 12 federal judges gave anonymous interviews, and 10 of them took that opportunity to criticize the Supreme Court. One judge described the Supreme Court's conduct as, quote, unquote, inexcusable. And another judge said the Supreme Court, quote, is effectively assisting the Trump administration in undermining the lower courts, end of quote. Then we have a big hit piece by the New York Times on October the 11th, 2025. That newspaper ran a story where they sought out judges specifically to criticize the Supreme Court. The Times approached 400 of the almost 1,500 federal judges with questionnaires. The Times intentionally solicited judges in districts that litigants considered to be unfavorable to the current president. Of the 400 judges approached, thank God only a small percentage took the offer. I think this is an important point. Then we can draw the conclusion most federal judges didn't take the bait of the New York Times because it violated the ethics of the judiciary. So only a small percentage did, but that's still a fabulous 65 judges responding to the Times questionnaire, and it happens that some responded with very harsh criticism. They gave the Times then the fodder that they needed to spin the narrative of a judiciary in crisis. The Times wrote, quote, "Federal judges called the Supreme Court emergency orders mystical, overly blunt, incredibly demoralizing and troubling," and another quote, "a slap in the face to the district courts." One judge compared their district's current relationship with the Supreme Court to, quote unquote, a war zone. Another said the courts were in the midst of, their words, a judicial crisis. I'm deeply concerned, and I hope the public at large is, that these public attacks on the court from sitting federal judges damage the public's faith and confidence in our judicial system. When judges call the legitimacy of their own branch of government into question, they erode the faith of the institutions itself. My colleague, the chairman of the Committee on Judiciary in the House of Representatives, shares these concerns. Together, we sent a letter of concern to Chief Justice Roberts. We expressed our concern that the conduct of the judges, as reported, may violate the applicable ethical canons. We also asked whether the judicial branch will give guidance to federal judges or even investigate this matter. The document called the Code of Conduct for United States Judges is very clear that judges have an obligation to uphold public confidence in the judiciary. For example, Canon 2 states, and I quote, "A judge should act at all times in a manner that promotes public confidence in the integrity and impartiality of the judiciary," end of quote. In 2024, Chief Judge Diaz of the Fourth Circuit applied the canon in resolving a judicial complaint against a judge for authoring an opinion piece lambasting a sitting Supreme Court justice. He concluded that the judge in question violated the canons and, quote, diminished the public confidence in the integrity and independence of the federal judiciary, end quote. Chief Judge Diaz's reasoning appears to apply with similar force to the recent anonymous attacks on the court. Anonymous? public comments from sitting judges describing the relationship between the Supreme Court and lower courts as a quote-unquote war zone, and otherwise attacking the legitimacy of the Supreme Court rulings undermines public confidence in the integrity and impartiality of the judiciary. In fact, it may violate the code of conduct. Judges shouldn't mimic the infighting and rhetorical attacks that are so common among us in the political arena. This damages the public faith in the judiciary. The Supreme Court is then a uniquely American institution that has played an important role since our public's founding, and in contrast to the other branches, meaning the political branches of the federal government, the Supreme Court is meant to stand above the day-to-day squabbles of politics. And that's not just the Supreme Court, as I implied, that's the entire, every level of the judicial branch. For the most part, the court does this remarkably well, speaking of the Supreme Court. We know this because neither Democrats or Republicans are always happy with the decision of our highest court. The court is either too conservative or too liberal, depending on the day and who you ask. But at the bottom, the job of the court is not to please us or agree with us, but to say what the law is. In recent years, we've seen vicious attacks against the court from a variety of directions, many aimed at weakening public confidence in this important institution. This is bad for all of us. So today, I'm here to defend the integrity of the Supreme Court and to urge the judicial branch to address these attacks that are coming from within, mostly by district court judges, and the ones that reply to everything anonymously and really don't have the guts to stand publicly with their criticism of the Supreme Court. So here is my bottom line. I call on the federal judiciary to give clear guidance to federal judges on acceptable public commentary and to take seriously the public's perception and confidence in the courts. I yield the floor.